Well, welcome and good morning to Elevenses, and I've got completely the wrong picture up because I was flicking through them and checking they were all going to work. So let's go back to where we should be. That's not it either. Yes, that's the right one. Good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly live webcast, Elevenses. And I've got a fairly packed show for you again today. I've actually had to leave one story out because I realised we were just getting too many in. The first thing I want to talk about is that there are major kerfuffles going on at the DVSA. The CEO has stepped down. There are changes to the learner booking system, which excludes DIAs and motorcycle training schools from booking the tests, and that basically the DIA are not happy about this at all. The Special Escort Group motorcycle rider, who unfortunately was involved in a fatal collision with a pedestrian in London, has been found not guilty of causing manslaughter by careless driving. A fake speed camera has appeared and disappeared in South London. An Adelaide farmer is incredibly lucky after he suffered a C2 vertebra fracture in his neck after crashing his bike on the farm. Suzuki are launching a new Welsh off-road training centre, and the Chinese company Kove, they are celebrating their historic world championship with a new 350RR Jerez model. Kawasaki are bringing in a budget W350 single. CFMoto launching a 1000cc adventure bike to top their 2026 range. And KTM are showing off an ultra limited edition Brabus 1400R signature bike. And then today in the in-depth section, we're going to have a look at some, I keep doing it, but it's statistics. But it's a UK Road Safety Week coming up next week. And I think it makes it all the more important to analyse crash and injury figures correctly, and I'll have a look at a couple of cases where I think there are some errors been made in that analysis. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so, and we'll get on with the show. Right, okay, so first things first. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing over the last few days. And in fact, I was making a trip down to Sussex, West Sussex, on Friday evening. I was delivering Science of Being Seen down there on behalf of Doc Bike West Sussex. Now, Doc Bike are an organisation based in Dorset. I have talked about them briefly before, but they have a road safety remit, and they have got involved in delivering biker down courses in several parts of southern England. Anyway, this was a long, very wet, very miserable drive down to St Leonard's, and you may be wondering why I bother to spend 6 hours plus in a car on a return journey just to deliver a 40-minute presentation. Well, the answer is fairly simple, actually. Firstly, I enjoy it. The evening gives me a chance to connect with groups of real bikers, and on Friday, I was actually lucky enough to catch up with an old forum friend I haven't seen in years. So lovely to see you, Layla. Secondly, it does give me a chance to keep pushing the original Science of Being Seen message. Now, this was to alert riders to the reasons behind the sorry mate, I didn't see you crash, the junction collision, to explain why 50 years of think bike firstly hasn't made any difference, but also to be aware that the sort of the simplistic solution that you put high vis on and you use day riding lights doesn't seem to have had any significant positive effect on reducing the regularity with which riders find themselves sort of face down on the tarmac after being caught out by this crash. Now, it was the commonest bike crash half a century ago when these schemes were both launched, and it remains the commonest collision type today. Now, sadly, the latest fire services version of Biker Down seems to have reverted to the standard ride bright advice to bikers in their crash prevention module. So I think it's even more important that I actually keep the science-based presentation going. Now, we have more courses already in the diary for next year. I just hope the next trip isn't in the torrential rain that's affected the last 3. And on the note of presentations, watch out for news of my short series of online winter webcasts. They will be back in the very near future. And I do actually have a fascinating topic for the first one lined up. And I will fill you in on that in the next show. Right, okay, so moving on rapidly, you probably noticed Storm Claudia. Now, that dumped huge amounts of rain in the area where there was a weather warning. So the weather forecast did get it right. Perhaps it underestimated the amount of rain that fell, but as the storm itself has edged away, flood warnings are still in force in some areas, and so keep an eye on what's going on. It will take several days for the floods in the worst affected areas to recede. Meanwhile, much colder Arctic air is now being drawn down over the UK, and it has replaced this warm and very moist tropical air that's covered the country for days. So temperatures are going from well above average to a little below average for the time of year, but no walls of snow just yet. So for today, much of England and Wales will have sunny spells, particularly in the west. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland look particularly sunny. A few showers will affect northern and eastern Scotland. They will be wintry over the high ground. They could run down the east coast, and it will take some time for the cloud to break up in the southeast here. It's still cloudy at the moment here. Monday will be chilly, largely dry, largely bright, lots of sunshine around, few showers still affecting northern and eastern Scotland and that North Sea coast. Tuesday sees some showery rain spread southeastwards. That will turn wintry on the hills in the north, especially overnight. And Wednesday looks to be a largely cold and dry day for most. But again, coastal areas will see some wintry showers at times. Okay, and so on with the news. And let's look at the state of the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, the DVSA. And this is a big, ongoing, and above all, complex issue. Now, first, Loveday Ryder has decided to step down as chief executive. She took over the agency in January 2021, and admittedly, she inherited the problems of the COVID pandemic. And in fact, just days after she stepped into the role, the nation went into its 3rd COVID lockdown. Now, so it's been a time that the DVSA chair, Nick Bittle, described as the most challenging period in the agency's history, and he thanked her for her leadership. The DFT Director General, Nick Joyce, he said further announcements regarding leadership will be made as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the DVSA continues to struggle with unprecedented test waiting times and ongoing battles with the test resellers. Standards checks for examiners are on hold, and there is instructors, and there's reported to be examiner discontent too. Now, on Wednesday, November the 12th, Secretary of State for Transport, Heidi Alexander, she briefed the Transport Select Committee on new measures said to be in place or coming into place to reduce test waiting times and to prevent learner drivers from being exploited by test resellers, the ones who are buying up test slots and then reselling them at inflated prices. She said, quote, "We inherited an enormous backlog of learners ready to ditch their L plates who have sadly been forced to endure record waiting times for their tests." She promised new measures to deliver thousands of extra tests over the next year, and this includes using 36 military driving examiners for 12 months to boost test capacity. Now, in the driver training industry, many are feeling frustrated. They believe the industry has been, or the agency has been, slow to get on top of the key challenges facing the industry. And the DVSA's successive rescue plans have been met with increased cynicism. The 7-point plan announced back in December, for example, waiting times were around 18 weeks. Now, back in January, they made changes, and that would allow only approved driving instructors or businesses employing ADIs to use the booking system, effectively banning the pre-booking of tests for learners not actively under instruction. Yet 6 months later, waiting times were up to 24 weeks, not down. Now, the new rules appear to ban ADIs from booking tests altogether. Only learners themselves will be allowed to book and manage their own practical tests. And they will also be limited to just 2 changes or swaps per booking. I think one rebook and one swap. And the area in which they can rebook will also be constrained to be close to the original test centre. And if that can't be done, then basically the test has to be cancelled and rebooked, which effectively takes the learner back to the bottom of that waiting list. Now, many in the industry seem to believe that professional opinions canvassed in the consultations before the changes were announced have been ignored. The DIA, Driving Instructors Association, they publicly support parts of the reform, the crackdown on unfair resellers, the bots that have been booking the tests automatically, and placeholder test bookings. But they believe that being restricted from booking for learners will make scheduling training harder, particularly when they're trying to coordinate bookings for test-ready students. Their executive, Carly Brookfield, has responded with a pretty scathing public letter, which has been written to Ministers Lillian Greenwood, Heidi Alexander and Richard Holden. And it highlights the widespread concern within the driver and rider training industry about how these decisions have been made and communicated, and the lack of meaningful engagement with the national bodies representing the profession. She says, "I'm writing to you to convey my members' state of shock and frustration at today's announcements and the manner in which they have been announced." Now, the full text is online, but basically the DIA are looking for meaningful engagement with the DVSA and DFT in order to reshape the system so that learners aren't exploited, but also that can go hand in hand with allowing instructors to do their job efficiently. Now, it's possible the new rules could be enforced by the spring next year, because there'll be notifications required to the booking system yet again, and legislative changes look likely to be necessary too. Now, another piece of news: the Met Police motorcyclist who hit a pensioner whilst escorting the Duchess of Edinburgh through London has been found not guilty of causing death by careless driving. Now, on the day of the incident in May 2023, PC Christopher Harrison, 68, he was one of a team of convoy motorcycle outriders travelling at speed along the West Cromwell Road in West London when Helen Holland, 81, crossed the road at a pedestrian crossing that was controlled by lights. Miss Holland had apparently walked 2.9 metres onto the road when PC Harrison's motorcycle hit her. She was left with a skull fracture. She had bruising to her arms, legs and body, fractures to her lower legs, and sadly she died 2 weeks after the crash. Now, the court heard that the lights were against PC Harrison at the moment of collision, and the prosecution argued that he should have exercised greater care whilst passing the red light. PC Harrison had denied the charge. He has 21 years of experience in the Special Escort Group, and he said he couldn't put it into numbers how many times he had made that journey and that he was very familiar with the route. Anyway, the jury acquitted PC Harrison after deliberating for 2 hours and 25 minutes. Now, another speed-related story, but in a slightly different manner. A fake speed camera, which was erected by a resident in South London, has been removed just days after it appeared on a busy residential street. Now, the structure was installed, let me get the picture of it up. There it is, yes. It was installed on Monday on Sandhurst Road in Catford, where residents say speeding and frequent collisions have been a long-standing concern. A Freedom of Information request submitted by the residents revealed that there have been 74 reported collisions on a nearby lane between 2019 and 2024, and they said this is more than 3 times the number of surrounding streets. So although unofficial, the device looks pretty convincing, and residents claim that it had an immediate effect, with many drivers slowing down whilst the camera was in place. But on Wednesday, 3 days after it was put up, contractors arrived and they removed the camera and the sort of planter it was stuck in using a crane. Now, Lewisham Council aren't in favour of measures like this. They say that they strongly discourage residents from installing fake signs or enforcement equipment, and they warn that individuals could actually be prosecuted if there was a crash as a result of this kind of thing being stuck up there. Now, the brief appearance of this fake camera has reignited discussion locally about speeding, the road layout, and the adequacy of traffic calming measures. But the council's previously advised residents that the likelihood of obtaining their own authorised speed camera on the road is low. Now, as it happens, this particular, where's it gone? There it is. I'll just give you a zoom in view of that as well. This appeared in Lower Hayford on one of my regular training routes. Oh, it must be at least 10 years ago, probably more like 15. Now, as you can see, it's another fake speed camera stuck in a hedge there. And I can't believe that no one had ever reported this to Oxfordshire Council, but as you can see, it's remained undisturbed. It could seriously do with a new coat of paint, in fact. Now, I heard rumours that the householder had explained that it was actually a bird box. If it is a bird box, it is a very uniquely shaped bird box. Right, quick break. To take a moment to subscribe to this show if you've not already done so. Every click helps a motorcyclist discover my, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling you riding buddies about 11ses. You can watch on catch up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com. Or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it when the show's over, of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, subscribe at any time. Well, that was frustrating, wasn't it? I don't know why that was stuttering so badly. Right, let's move on from the fake speed cameras. We've got Kevin says, look in. And I've got a coffee bot alert that Nick's bought something from the shop. So good morning, Kevin, and thank you, Nick. Right, so where was I next? Okay, I'm off to Australia with a story. Now, this is a rather alarming one, but also one with a happy ending, really. An Adelaide Hills farmer has turned out to be a very lucky man indeed. Bevan Pewsley, he's 66. He came off his bike on steep terrain on his farm back in September. And whilst his wife, Sandy, was driving him to hospital, she spotted a passing country fire service vehicle and flagged it down to ask for help. So Nairn Country Fire Service volunteer and State Operations Officer Matt Davis stopped, and he told Mrs. Pewsley to drive her husband to the CFS State Training Centre, which was apparently just a few metres away, because they had medical supplies there. And there, Mr. Davis, with the assistance of other members of the CFS, used their first aid training to check the patient over. He kept complaining he could feel tingling through his neck and running down his chest, Mr. Davis said. He said it felt like it was prickly, so I was like, okay, there's something potentially not right with his spine. So they immobilized Mr. Pewsley's head, then called for an ambulance to take him to the Royal Adelaide Hospital. And it turned out that Mr. Pewsley's C2 vertebra had been damaged. That's at the base of the brainstem, so right underneath the skull, basically at the top of the spine. Now, apparently very few people actually survived that injury, and one wrong move could have killed him, and he was placed in a coma for 4 days. Remarkably, he's expected to make a full recovery. Now, Suzuki has announced details of its new off-road motorcycle training centre in South Wales. It's located near Merthyr Tydfil, and it's close to the Monster Mountain Motocross Complex, which I confess I have never heard. Anyway, the new centre provides access to 300 acres of varied terrain, including fire roads, shale tracks, and technical single-track sections. Suzuki say the site is designed to accommodate riders of all abilities. So the centre will operate a fleet of off-road motorcycles, including the V-Strom 800DE, the V-Strom 1050DE, and the newly relaunched really, DRZ4S. Training will cover core skills such as body positioning, throttle control and braking, along with more advanced techniques for the challenging terrain. And sessions will be delivered in small groups, no more than 3 riders per instructor, and a maximum of 6 riders in total. A structure intended to provide for focused coaching. Full day's training, including motorcycle hire, fuel, maintenance and refreshments, starts at £300 per person. School will be led by Jeff Walker, who has more than 3 decades of off-road instruction experience, and he'll be supported by a specialist team. And Jack Tyrrell, Suzuki GB's motorcycle marketing manager, said the company was delighted to launch the centre in partnership with the SR75 Suzuki racing team. Right, okay, so let's crack on with some news about bikes. Now, I have had to remove one story here because I was just running out of time, and that's the one on helmets. I'll come back to that one next time. Anyway, moving on. Given all the attention to the top tiers of World Championship racing, you may not have noticed, and I confess it slipped past me, that history was actually made last month, October the 19th, 2025, at Jerez in Spain, because the Chinese motorcycle manufacturer Kove, they secured their World Supersport 300 Championship. It's the first time a Chinese brand has ever won a world title in any kind of motorcycle racing series. Now, the historic victory was achieved by their rider, a young Basque rider named Benet Fernandez. He rides with the Team 109 Retro Traffic Kove team. He achieved his success riding the company's 321 RRS model. And this follows Kove achieving their first win in that championship, the World Supersport 300 series, with Julio Garcia in the saddle late last season. And to celebrate, what have they done? Well, they've launched a model. And if I zoom in on the picture there, I think you can just about make out there is a sort of a World Championship logo on the side of the front end of the bike. So what is it? Well, it's a brand new 344 cc liquid cooled twin cylinder engine. It produces 46.9 horsepower, so that's basically bang on the A2 license limit. That comes in at 11,500 RPM. There's 23.6 pound-feet of torque at 9,000 RPM, and the bike is claimed to be good for 112 miles per hour or 180 kilometers per hour. The machine actually weighs slightly less, 2.7 kilograms less than the previous incarnation. They've done some lightning work in the motor apparently, and the curb weight is just 164 kilograms, which is remarkably light. That's about 350 pounds if my rapid mental maths is right. Now, a motorcycle which takes the opposite approach to styling is this one here. Now, with the resurgence of small cc and inexpensive models hitting the UK market, Kawasaki is taking a plunge into this pool too. And this is the W230. As you can see, it's a classic styled machine. It was launched early this year and it's due to appear in the UK early next year. Now, the engine is the air-cooled 233cc unit, which comes from the KLX 230. It's a dual sport, that particular bike, but this one has been modified. Obviously, the styling is completely different, but the engine also gets changes to the crankshaft to change the inertia on the crankshaft, presumably to make it less revvy, but a bit more torquey, I guess. Camshaft profiles have changed. The exhaust tuning is for road use, and the image is very much in the character of earlier W series models going back to the 1960s. It's sometimes easy to forget how long Kawasaki have actually been building bikes. So you get that sort of teardrop tank, the wire spoke wheels. There are gaiters, rubber gaiters on the forks, and that sort of two colour single piece seat. Round headlight, dual analog instruments. There does get some modern additions. It does get LED lighting, and there is an LCD display for providing trip and fuel information. Wheels are 18 front, 17 rear. Seat height, a very accessible 745 millimeters, 29.3 inches. Fueled up, the bike barely weighs anything, 143 kilos, 315 pounds. Unfortunately, I've saved the bad bit for last. That air-cooled engine will also bring 60s performance with it, just 17 horsepower, 12.7 kilowatts. So although it's outside the sort of the 125 learner limit, it's for 230cc bike, it's barely more powerful. The bike will just about hit a dual carriageway speed of 70 flat out, I would guess. And the price tag, £4,654. That may not be enough to entice buyers to this machine. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, let's have a look at the new CFMoto. This is the 2026 1000 MTX adventure model, and it arrives as CFMoto's new range-topping machine. Now, similar to the 800 MTX, it's their biggest and most tech-rich bike yet. But the long fuel range and the off-road sort of capable setup, they say, makes it a strong contender for long-distance touring and adventure riders. Now, it's based on KTM's LC8C parallel twin engine that's currently found in the 990 Duke and the 990 RCR sports bike. This 947 double overhead cam parallel twin, it delivers around 111 horsepower, 113 PS, peak torque 105 newton meters, 77.4 pound-feet, and that comes in a relatively lowly 6,250 RPM. The chassis does appear to be based on the 800 MTX, but it does get KYB suspension front and rear, fully adjustable forks up front, and a fully adjustable rear monoshock. The bike also gets a larger than normal 8-inch TFT display. It gets cruise control, bi-directional quick shifter, and heated grips. A Bosch 6-axis IMU means it gets the full suite of riding aids, 5 riding modes, adjustable 3-stage traction control, cornering ABS, of course, and Brembo supply the brakes. The 18-inch wire spoked wheels, they're fitted with tubeless Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR dual purpose tires. The machine also gets a skid plate and handguards. I meant to say that those tires are tubeless. Can't remember if I did. Always good news on a spoked wheel these days. A 22.5 litre fuel tank that's said to offer around 450 kilometers, 280 miles of range, and the bike's dry weight is listed at 199 kilograms. I guess you probably need to add about 35 kilos to that to get to a full tank, oil, and anything else that you need to put into the bike, like a battery probably. No word on price, but it is rumoured to be very competitive, possibly even under £11,000. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, altogether, is this machine. You'll need a deep wallet for this. This was shown off at EICMA, the Milan show, and it's KTM's ultra limited edition of their sort of high-end naked bike. It's the Brabus 1400R Signature. It's powered by the 1350cc L8 V twin, which produces no less than 190 horsepower and 107 pound-feet of torque. And it's all built on the platform of the 1390 Super Duke R Evo. Now, the bike boasts premium features, carbon fiber bodywork, top of the range Brembo brakes, white power Apex semi-active suspension, full TFT electronics, and there will only be 100 units produced. So for global sales, they're priced at around £44,300 in the UK, which I assume ensures most of them will find a home in a collection somewhere. You may be wondering why something like this appears at a time when Bajaj Auto, KTM's new owners, face financial headwinds and broader market pressures, putting KTM back on the map, but presumably it had already been paid for. That would be my guess. Anyway, the question of whether KTM's strategy of such a hyper expensive designer studio model really moves the needle meaningfully on KTM's recovery is a moot point. My suspicion is that as a sort of what's sometimes termed a niche halo model, it'll be dropped like a brick once those 100 have been sold on. Right, okay, so moving to the final section in today's show, we'll have a look at today's in-depth topic. Now, today is the first day of Road Safety Week. Also, I should know more correctly, tomorrow is the first day of Road Safety Week. It runs from Monday the 17th to Sunday the 23rd. And as usual, motorists here in the UK are being encouraged to take extra precautions, although I never see the explanation as to why 1 week in a year should be any different to any other year. But anyway, when it comes to motorcyclists, it appears that research, no reference was given in the news item, has found that just over half of all motorcyclists have been involved in a road accident. I thought we'd stop using that word. And 64% of those claimed that it was due to the fault of another road user. Now, I'm actually quite surprised it's only just over half. But anyway, that leads me to 2 reports on motorcycle safety, which have been based on the very latest DFT data. Now, I know I keep banging on about this, but it is important when somebody makes a statement that involves statistics, check the figures for yourself. Don't rely on somebody else's analysis. So this brings me to this chart, which appeared on LinkedIn with a short statement. It started, this table shows the other vehicle involved in fatal crashes from the latest DFT figures. So far, so good. And again, you can see the various columns. You can see cars, you can see motorcycles, and in the last column there, you'll see the number of fatalities which occurred where no other vehicle was involved. The writer says, for motorcycles, it's usually a car that's involved in the collision, no surprise there. But 1 in 4 crashes, no other vehicle is involved. Rider error on a bend, but look at cars, it's 1 in 3. Notice what he says, crashes. The writer used this sort of fact packet calculation to conclude that, quote, the usual accusation that motorcyclists are all reckless looks totally flawed, and that, quote, car drivers, even with nearly all having ABS yaw control, 4 wheels, airbags, seat belts, and a steel cage with crumple zones, still have more fatal single vehicle crashes. And his final question was, who's the more reckless then? But look at the numbers that he's actually talking about. These are not crashes, these are fatalities. Although there is obviously a connection between the two, one does not equal the other. It's, first point I could make is that you can kill a maximum of 2 people on a motorcycle. My old Nissan Serena, which was technically a car, seated 8. So, you can have a lot more deaths within a car than involved in a motorcycle crash. Now, the next question is that we're not comparing like with like here, because there are something like 34 million cars on the roads of the UK compared with around 1.3 million motorcycles. That's the latest data I've just got hold of yesterday, and that's a ratio of around 26:1. So do some sums. Take the fatality rates per vehicle in a single vehicle crashes, divide it by the number of vehicles on the road, and for cars that sum is 231 divided by 34 million. For motorcycles, it's 78 divided by 1.3 million motorcycles. So the answer for cars is 6.8 fatalities per million cars. For motorcycles, it's actually 60 fatalities per million motorcycles. That's about 8.8 times as many riders killed on bikes in a single vehicle crash than are killed in a car in a single car crash. So, this is 9 times more likely to be killed, more or less. And what I haven't done yet is even begin to factor in the mileage figures, because riders do a lot less miles on average than car drivers. Now, he's right to question the reckless accusation that's always levelled at riders. As I keep pointing out, whilst 350 rider fatalities per year is 350 too many, that does mean that 1,290,000, you work it out for yourself, 1,000 plus riders don't kill themselves. But that makes it all the more important to understand what numbers tell us. Now, not entirely coincidentally, since he was presumably looking at much the same data, I got an email alert from the mag to tell me that there's been a blog update by Colin Brown recently. Now, Colin and I have had some useful chats in the past, but I was rather surprised to see his article entitled "UK Motorcyclists Are Getting Safer. Here's the proof." And he went on to say that, quote, he'd been digging through the latest Department for Transport casualty data and buried beneath the usual doom and gloom headlines a genuinely positive story. Riders are getting better at the things that matter most, and these are real improvements in competence, not technology doing the work for them. He says, quote, "The numbers don't lie," and he goes on to report that loss of control, that classic combination of too much speed for conditions and not enough grip or experience, is plummeted. Where it once featured in nearly half of all fatal motorcycle crashes is now down to just over a third. That's a 29% improvement. I'm not sure how you quite work that one out, but anyway. And he says poor positioning, overshot turns, dodgy maneuvers have dropped by 41% across all motorcycle casualties. However, the latest road casualty data from the Department of Transport's annual report showed that motorcycle fatalities were up 8% in 2024, up from 315 to 340. Now, motorcyclists were the only major road user group to show an increase in deaths. Now, Colin also reports, and I quote again, "The proportion of casualties where the rider's observation was cited as a contributory factor has fallen by 17% over the last decade." And again, he says, crashes involving learners or inexperienced riders are down 27%. That suggests training standards are working and riders are staying on their bikes long enough to develop genuine competence. Now, I really can't see how he could come to that conclusion. I mean, CBT hasn't changed materially in 35 years. It first appeared in 1990. The tiered test has changed the ages at which riders can advance to a license for a particular capacity of machine, or power output, I should say more correctly. But the training itself is broadly unchanged. Now, as it happens, I also got a report on the dock bike presentation at the Road Safety GB conference the other week, to the effect that the age group with the largest number of casualties in the Dorset area, which is the home of dock bike, has switched from older riders to youngsters. Now, I haven't done a deep dive into the figures that Colin's obviously done, so I can't explain these discrepancies easily. But what I will say is that firstly, there's been a change in the way that police collect crash and injury data. In December 2015, serious injury casualties started to be recorded more accurately due to a change in the reporting system used by the police, which was called crash. And this means that serious injuries, which may previously have been classified as slight injuries, what did I write there? I can't remember. I can't actually work out what I wrote. I think it's the other way around. I think it's serious injuries are now reclassified as slight injuries. I better check that actually, because I'm not quite sure what I wrote there. Anyway, so the data isn't strictly comparable. I don't think all police services have been using crash either. I think some of them have been using Stats 19. So that data is collated by the DFT, and I do know that the DFT have a kind of fudge factor that they use to try to make the data compatible over the entire period, but they say it doesn't work well for small numbers. Now, second, I've reported here on ELEVENSES that studies of loss of control crashes, sometimes known as capsize crashes, show that the fitment of ABS has been linked to a reduced number of these crashes. Now, ABS has been compulsory on bikes for almost a decade. And many riders were opting voluntarily for the system long before that. I've got ABS on my bike and it predates the legislation. So the reduced number of loss of control crashes is it rider skill, or is it more likely that it's actually the ABS kicking in and saving the rider? And that's my guess. Third, we simply cannot assume that fewer casualties automatically imply fewer crashes. That's basically the same as the first report I mentioned. If the proportion of riders suffering injuries has fallen compared with the number killed, it could be that the bike kit has improved and is actually doing a better job of preventing injuries, even though there are many crashes which are simply unsurvivable no matter what you wear. But look at the long-term data. I've got some, I've got the data. I created it for Science of Being Seen. Go back to 1980s, and the crash rate was way up here, and it came down very steadily to about 2011, 2012. And since then, it has pretty much plateaued at between 300 and 350 fatalities per annum. So, I honestly not sure how Colin's come to his conclusions there. I think more investigation is required. One final point, as I said before, comparing this year's data with last year's data is a meaningless exercise because you don't get any timeline to see what's going on. It's just two snapshots. But it didn't stop Nicholas Lies of the IAM doing just that, trying to make the rise in rider fatalities of 8% between 2023 and 2024 sound dramatic, whilst he completely failed to mention that the same data figures had dropped 12% between 2022 and 2023. And talking of crashes, one final piece of news, I will just repeat this. About this time last year, I launched a new book called Crash Scene and Motorcycle. It was a series of anecdotes, observations, looks at research, all connected with the theme of motorcycle crashes. And I have just released as an ebook the first of 3 companion pieces. This one's called Crash Scene Junction, and it looks at a very specific problem. You probably guessed, the standard motorcycle crash that happens at intersections. It's short, so it's just over 60 pages. It's inexpensive because I do actually want people to buy it and read it to educate themselves. So it's just £7 as an instant download from my coffee store. And with that purchase, you also get a month's free access to all my Science of Being Seen, no, not Science Being Seen, Skills on Saturday and Tips on Tuesday posts as well. There'll be a paperback coming soon, and 2 other books are in the works, Cornering and Overtaking, the other 2 standard crashes that hopefully I'll get the first out by Christmas and the 3rd book early next year. Right. Okay, Nick's looked in and said, good morning. Kevin has said, I've seen the table and the narrative, and he says, thanks for taking the time to pull it apart somewhat. Yeah, I think it's important that, we do analyse statements like this. It's easy to say motorcyclists do marvellously well, but, you need to interpret the data properly. Crash rates aren't nearly as high as we might think from the sort of the headline fatality and injury numbers. But yeah, we still need to work on getting them down. Anyway, that's it for today. Time to wrap up. But before I go, let's just give a quick shout out to last week's supporters and subscribers. Christine ENR, Chris, he bought the Surviving the Roads Think Like a Worship Captain ebook. Javi and Brian, they both purchased the brand new Crash Scene Junction ebook, which came out just a day or so ago. Claire, Living Martial Arts, Johan, Mad Cockney, and Anonymous. So thank you all very much indeed for your support. I very much appreciate that. Right, so if you want to join them and show your support for my work, you can indeed do that via my coffee page. So that's it for today. Thanks everybody for looking in. I will cover the helmets with the augmented reality next time out, and I've got a bit more time. But again, if you're out there on the bike enjoying a ride today, the rain has stopped across most of the country, but do watch out for flooded roads and the detritus, obviously, it's left behind: mud, gravel, all that kind of rubbish. So stay shiny side up, and hopefully I will see you for the next show. I might even have a video to show you. Here it goes.